Good evening, I'm Abdullah Hussein. Welcome to Sudan in a Week on Al-Balad News. This week's roundup brings you the latest developments and headlines from Sudan. Next week, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan will visit Egypt at the invitation of the President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to participate in the World Open Forum in the new administrative capital, as announced by Sudan's ambassador to Egypt. Sudan has requested the UN Security Council to initiate the disarmament of militia groups that have transformed into terrorist organizations. The country is also asking for support to implement a comprehensive disarmament, mobilization, and reintegration program, as well as backing for the establishment of a unified national army. Sudan's UN representative Al-Harith Idris reported that the RSF have used heavy weaponry against unarmed civilians in eastern Al Jazeera. He added also, ending the conflict depends on halting the influx of mercenaries from the African coast. Al-Harith added, approximately 260 civilians have been killed by the RSF in Al Jazeera state, and thousands of mercenaries have entered Sudan through the Adri border crossing. Jibril Ibrahim, speaking from New York, stated that the RSF is merely a hired gun without a vision, highlighting differences between them and the other Sudanese movements. The Nida al-Wasat platform reports that the RSF has given residents of Mustafa Quraishi village in rural Hasahisa 24 hours to evacuate forcibly after looting their property and money and subjecting them to beatings and mistreatment. The Return to the Foundation movement accuses Hamdok of following a plan to dismantle Sudan. The Eastern Brigade forces have begun securing the borders of Kassala state. A Rapid Support Forces soldier reportedly humiliated a civilian in the Siriha village of Al Jazeera state. Eritrean President Isaias Afwerki warned neighboring countries providing arms and drones to Sudanese rebels, emphasizing Eritrea's readiness to respond. He expressed that Eritrea's support for Sudan is a moral obligation and criticized RSF leader Hemeti, describing him as simple-minded with unclear motives. Former RSF affiliates claimed that if not for Burhan's vigilance and stance, Hemeti would have taken control of Sudan and established his own state. Sudan's Human Rights Commission has described the militia's actions in eastern Al Jazeera villages as ethnic cleansing, while the Sudanese Doctors Syndicate warns of a genocide in Al Jazeera villages. The Sudanese Attorney General has pledged to prosecute all who commit crimes and violate the dignity of Sudanese citizens. Upon his arrival in London, former Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok faced a police complaint with planned protests at Chatham House on Thursday. The Jazeera Conference has documented 37 cases of rape in Rufa'a, with some victims being medical personnel. The RSF has burned corn crops in several villages in eastern Al Jazeera. Somalia condemns the RSF's attacks in eastern Al Jazeera, which targeted innocent civilians. Sudan's embassy in Tehran held a press conference where Ambassador Dr. Abdulaziz Hassan Saleh discussed developments in Sudan, focusing on the RSF crimes and violations in eastern and northern Al Jazeera and the Butana region. He called for the classification of the RSF as a terrorist organization. The Sudanese Ba'ath Party claims that the militia has executed 600 civilians in Al Jazeera by firing squad. The Arab League issued a strong statement condemning the RSF's severe violations, with spokesperson Jamal Rushdie noting that some crimes amount to ethnic cleansing. He emphasized the need for the urgent international and regional cooperation to end the war and hold perpetrators accountable. The Egyptian Foreign Ministry expressed concern over the RSF's brutal attacks on unarmed civilians, including children, women, and the elderly in eastern Al Jazeera. These actions were deemed blatant violations of international humanitarian law. Egypt reiterates its call for an immediate ceasefire and the implementation of the Jeddah Declaration principles, aiming for a comprehensive political solution. The Sudanese ambassador in Cairo announced the accreditation of 37 Sudanese schools in Egypt. British Labour Party member Robert Shield commented on the Sudanese crowds in London, describing it as a democratic scene that reflects the desires and rejections of the Sudanese people. Dozens of Sudanese protested in London, denouncing the positions of the civilian forces coalition Taqaddum, accused of supporting the Rapid Support Forces. The Taqaddum delegation faced an organized campaign from Sudanese demonstrators who gathered outside the institute, chanting against Hamdok and Taqaddum leaders. Large numbers of British police were deployed, preventing protesters from entering the venue. That's it for this week's top stories. Thank you for watching. See you next Friday on Al-Balad News. Have a great weekend.